welcome to Purple September. Purple September is a tradition that I started years ago. It began after I noticed that for 2 years in a row, September was a very big month for me, in terms of introspection and my engagement with art and the world around me. I was having these life-altering realizations and finally understanding who I am and my place in the world while watching movies and TV shows, listening to music, reading books, and viewing art in ways I hadn't before. I don't know if the way I was experiencing art led me to think a little deeper about things, or if I was primed to view art differently because I was already thinking deeper, but either way they went hand in hand. It became the symbol in my life, a time set aside for reflection and introspection. A time to engage in art and find meaning wherever I can, but always this sense of an almost out-of-body experience clashing with being completely grounded. This is my invitation to you to join me for Purple September. You don't need to stick around for the whole month, but I do encourage you to spend a day, a night, an hour, just letting yourself engage. The first year of Purple September was 2018. I was 17 years old, in my final year of high school and about to graduate. My exams were coming up and I was more stressed than ever. I was in such a vulnerable place at the time and felt like I had no direction whatsoever. I was spending so much time trying to figure out who I am and what I was meant to do with my life. I felt completely lost. And so for this 1 month, I just let myself sink into feeling whatever I was feeling. My most vivid memory from that September was laying across my bed, staring at the ceiling with a purple light on, listening to Grow by Conan Gray. I can't listen to that song without crying. It was just this moment of realizing that everything in my life was about to change. My school life was basically over, my teens were coming to an end, and there was no way to hold on to my childhood. It was gone. And all of a sudden, there were new expectations on me. I had such a fragile sense of self at the time that it was completely overwhelming. But I put music on. And I listened, and I sung, and I danced, and I started to feel like maybe everything would be okay. The next year, when September rolled around, I was in a very strange place. I wasn't doing very well, but so much had changed in that last year. I had graduated, I'd started a job, and I was trying to navigate friendship when I wasn't surrounded by my peers for 5 days a week. September came around, and it was my first time going any amount of time, really, without my parents. They had gone away for 2 weeks and had left myself and my brother home alone. We were both adults, it was completely fine, but it was something I had never experienced before. It was scary and new and just different to everything I had known. During that time, I found myself putting on this purple light and putting on music and just feeling. My clearest memory from that September was sitting in bed and writing a song for the first time in months. I had spent the evening thinking about how, as much as I didn't feel ready for it, I was growing up and that wasn't going to stop. So I wrote a song about it. It wasn't particularly good, but it did get finished, and it was an emotional release. It was during that second September that I realized this had happened before. That September just seemed to be a very introspective month for me. A part of me thinks that it could potentially be because September is the start of spring. Change is coming. There is this kind of flux in the air. Everything feels a little bit different and new. It feels like growth. The flowers are blooming, and it's okay to try new things, even if those new things are only a new way of thinking. This year is the 7th Purple September, which feels crazy. The last 5 years have gone by so insanely quickly, I don't remember specific things from each September. During the COVID years in particular, everything seemed to just blend together. I was in this constant state of introspection while also trying to bury down all of the things I was feeling, while also relying on art to feel much of anything. So nothing in particular stands out. Last year though, 2023, was different to any September I had had before. At the start of that year, I had spoken to a friend about the fact that I was nervous. I wasn't going to get to spend September the way I usually do, and this tradition had become really important to me, so I was feeling a bit uneasy. I was going on a trip, which is exciting. The fact that my September was going to be different was a good thing, but I wasn't going to be home for all of September, and I felt a bit strange about the disruption to this tradition. I was right. I wasn't able to engage in Purple September the way I normally do. I wasn't able to put a purple light on and sit in bed with headphones and loud music, but what I was able to do was engage with art and the world around me and story, but more than anything, to engage in history in a way I hadn't before. I think history and art go hand in hand. So much of art requires historical context, and so much of history can be learnt through art. I was in a place with such a rich history and spent September going to ancient sites. Some of these places were over 5,000 years old and contain stories that we will never get to know. Lives of people whose stories will never be told. My truest moment of Purple September last year wasn't in September at all, but early October. I went to a White Night festival. They happen all over the world, but I was specifically in Valletta in Malta. The city was open all night. It was bustling and alive in a way I had never seen. I had dinner, and on the corner there was a jazz band. I walked down the street and there was a DJ and people dancing and a concert band, and just so much art everywhere I looked. My main event for the night was going to a gallery. Most public buildings had been opened for free for the night, and so I spent hours in this gallery looking at art that I wouldn't have seen otherwise. There was one piece in particular that caught my eye that I couldn't step away from. It was tucked away in a corner and just so beautiful. I felt so lucky that I got to see so many of the things I wanted to see that trip. But there was one thing I hadn't gotten a chance to do, and that was to see some of the paintings by an artist that I studied in high school in person. Our trip was coming to an end. I knew we weren't going to make it back into the city before we left, and while I was so happy with everything I had already seen, a part of me was a little bit upset. But I found out that the place that these artworks were held was open for the night, and I managed to get in. If you're curious, I'm talking about the Co-Cathedral and some of the works of Caravaggio. It was a breathtaking experience. From the outside, this building is quite plain, made of the same stone as everything around it, but you step in and it is gilded and incredible. The tour took us to each of the chapels. We learnt about some of the history of the building. We saw the altar and came back around. And the last place we stopped, you walk through the walls full of art, but the back of this room held a painting called The Beheading of St. John the Baptist. It is an incredible piece of art, and nothing could have prepared me for the scale of this piece. There was another of his paintings on a stand, and it just blew me away. I'm not a religious person. This wasn't a spiritual moment. It was just the beauty of this artwork. The overwhelming sense of awe, seeing a painting in person that I had only ever seen on a screen. I stood there and I cried. It felt bigger than me. Like I was connected to humankind. I can't explain it. There is just this moment when you engage with art or the world around you that stops you in your tracks. I never go into Purple September with a set goal other than to engage in Purple September, to be open. I don't have a certain thing I want to think about. I don't have an art form I want to focus on. I just know I want to feel as much as I can. The reality of Purple September is often me sitting in bed with my purple light on, watching a movie or a TV show, maybe reading a book or listening to music. One thing I do quite often is pause whatever I'm engaging in and just let myself think. There is no rush to finish anything. I don't need to finish a whole movie or listen to a whole album, because if one part sticks with me, I want to sit with it. I want to rewind it and watch it again. I want to record my thoughts about it. I've talked a lot about the consumption of art, but a huge part of Purple September is the creation of art. When you've been introspective, I think it is a natural response to be creative. For me, that creativity has shown itself in different ways. Sometimes I've gotten back into painting, something I'm not particularly good at, but is so fulfilling. Sometimes it's poetry, something I love doing but never make time for. But the thing that has consistently come back into my life every September is songwriting. It's the thing I've been doing for the longest, nearly half my life, which is wild because I still feel like a total beginner. It's interesting because songwriting is something that is so insanely personal, but it is also the perfect medium for storytelling. I have written songs that explain my feelings in ways that I thought I could never express, that get to the core of me in ways I didn't think there were words for. But I also have songs that aren't about me at all, that are about characters from a book or a show, that are completely made up stories that I decided to tell. There is more of both of those things in September for me. I write my most honest songs in September, and I tell the most stories. So this is my invitation to you, to join me for Purple September. There is so much beauty in this world and so much inspiration to find. I haven't even touched on the way that nature is involved. With spring in the air, I like to go on walks. I like to watch as the world around me changes. As flowers bloom and birds get territorial, sometimes I just sit outside in silence and hear everything happening around me. I just feel connected to the world. It's a beautiful thing to find those moments of peace. There's a comfort in realizing that as much as we humans like to imagine ourselves separate from the natural world, we are just animals. We are a part of everything around us. We're no better than the insects that crawl along the ground, or the birds in the sky, or the fish in the sea. At the core of Purple September is an openness to feel awe. To see a storm rolling in and know that it has more power than we ever will. To see waves crashing on the shore and know that we are powerless to stop it. There is a beauty in knowing we can't control everything. I know I keep talking about spring because in this part of the world we're going into spring, but I think this works for autumn as well. Both spring and autumn are times of such change. The beauty found in spring is different to the beauty found in autumn, but both are equally as inspiring. You don't need to do things the exact way that I do them, but I encourage you to find time to engage with what is around you. And I encourage you to share something in the comments. One thing that inspires you or moves you. I think that community is really important, and sharing these things can make them all the more wonderful. If you've stuck around this long, thank you. This is something that is so important to me, and I really wanted to share it with you. I never usually script my videos so thoroughly, and I'm really bad at reading out loud, so if I stumbled over my words a little bit, I'm sorry. Thank you for being patient with me. I can't wait to see what this September brings. I've already been feeling more inspired than usual. I started writing a song the other day on a whim. I've been looking at my fiction projects. I just feel so content in September. But that's all I have for today. Thank you for sticking around, and happy Purple September.